Welcome to Tech News Briefing. It's Thursday, October 26th. I'm Zoe Thomas for The Wall Street Journal. For years, Apple has had a lot of links to China. But global political tensions, a rise in domestic smartphone competition, and a ban by Chinese authorities on government employees using iPhones and other foreign devices are pushing Apple to lessen its dependency on the country. Luxshare Precision, a Chinese firm that makes AirPods, the Apple Watch, and the recently released iPhone 15, is making that harder. Luxshare's skill at assembling the tech giant's products is proving simply too good to give up. Joining us to talk about this is Tokyo Bureau Chief Peter Landers. So Peter, last week, Tim Cook made this surprise visit to China and to Luxshare's factory near Shanghai. Tell us about that visit.
Right. Tim Cook went all across China. He visited Apple stores, he visited government officials, and he visited the factory of Luxshare Precision, one of the key assemblers of Apple products. And it may not seem so unusual for a CEO to visit a factory, but in fact, it's quite unusual for Tim Cook to talk about who actually makes the Apple products that we all use.
You know, a lot of listeners are probably familiar with Foxconn as a manufacturer of Apple products in China. How does Luxshare fit into this picture?
That's right. Foxconn Technology Group has been traditionally by far the biggest maker of iPhones, and they have a huge factory in central China that's sometimes called iPhone City. But increasingly, Luxshare, which is based in China, unlike Foxconn, which is based in Taiwan, Luxshare has been taking a bigger role in assembling all kinds of Apple products, including the iPhone. And we understand that next year, Luxshare will even take on this role of what's called new product introduction, or turning the Apple blueprints into sort of a manufacturing plan. And that's a key role in producing the iPhone.
How did Luxshare come to take on this bigger share of Apple manufacturing?
A couple of reasons. One is that the Taiwan-based assemblers, including Foxconn, have become a little bit less enamored of the Apple business because the profit margins tend to be quite low, and Luxshare is more willing to take on some of that low-margin business. That comes from people familiar with the supply chain, and also there was a issue with Foxconn late last year at the tail end of China's very harsh COVID-19 restrictions, and there was some unrest at their factory. Apple felt like they wanted to have more of an even split between Foxconn and other assemblers led by Luxshare.
Can you tell us a little bit about Luxshare's founder? Because she's an important part of this bigger picture between Apple and its ties to China, right?
Yeah, it's an amazing story of Grace Wang, or Wang Laichun is her Chinese name, who grew up in southern China and started out on the assembly line. She didn't go to college. She started out as a regular factory worker like tens of millions of other factory workers in China, assembling the electronics that are exported around the world. And at the age of about 20 or 21, she started working for Foxconn. And Foxconn's founder was a mentor for her. She became a manager and moved up the ranks. And eventually she started her own company with her brother to assemble electronics. And initially they were doing a lot of work for Foxconn, and then they became more independent. She has an incredible attention to detail, according to people who have worked with her. And Tim Cook also visited one of the Luxshare factories in 2017 and praised Grace Wang at that time. She knows all the different models, the specs for each model, the connectors each one uses. She's a real expert in the Apple products and the Apple supply chain. And she herself, based on her shares in Luxshare, is a billionaire coming from nothing.
That's a tremendous story, but from Apple's perspective, it's still looking to expand its manufacturing base away from China. What's making it so hard to move away from Luxshare and to move into other countries?
It really is what some people call the ecosystem of companies in China. It's not just Luxshare or Foxconn, but all the suppliers to them, the people who know how to make an iPhone. It's a huge challenge to make these products. Luxshare also assembles the AirPods, this tiny little piece of electronics that you put in your ear, has hundreds of parts. It's a very delicate process, and it's not just brute force or having hundreds of thousands of workers at peak times, although they do have that. It's also the experts on the assembly line who know how to make a high-quality product that doesn't cost all that much when you consider the amount of technology that's packed into it. And so recreating that ecosystem in another country, whether it be Vietnam or India, is not easy.
What's the risk for Apple if it can't shift away from Luxshare and from China generally?
The political risk is just enormous for Apple in having most of its electronics, including most of its iPhones, made in a country, China, that is largely adversarial to the United States with a communist government, as we all know. Now, the communist government has often been quite cooperative with Apple and helped Apple build the supply chain in China, but still political tensions can always interfere. Just in the past few days, we've heard about a tax investigation into Foxconn that was reported in Chinese official media. So that's a potential problem for Apple if one of their big assemblers is facing some kind of investigation by the Chinese government.
That was our Tokyo Bureau Chief, Peter Landers. And that's it for Tech News Briefing. Today's show was produced by Julie Chang with supervising producer Melanie Roy. I'm Zoe Thomas for the Wall Street Journal. We'll be back tomorrow. Thanks for listening.